All right,
And it's this one is like where.
this one is the right one. Mike Bottini. Very instrumental in making sure that we had all these talks today. He gets the last talk.
Last but not least, hopefully. Thank you, Tim. Okay, so. Update to our mammal. So we're in year 2. We just finished year 2 of our Long Island Mammal Survey, and I want to give a shout out to our New York State zoologists, Matt Schlesinger particularly. He was really helpful in encouraging us to do this. Oh, okay. And so we have here our largest terrestrial mammal, the white-tailed deer. We have several species of deer on Long Island, by the way. We have a Sitka deer that was introduced by hunting clubs and game clubs, and mule deer as well. Then we have our smallest mammal there, the masked shrew, which was tricky to document because it's so small and lightweight. It doesn't trip the traps, the Sherman traps. And for some reason, our pitfall traps didn't work out very well. And then the semi-aquatic mammals like the muskrat and the river otter. So why now? This is a project that's been on my mind for a number of years. And mostly, I'd say it was precipitated by the questions around whether or not we had gray fox and the other species that I was concerned about was mink. I did a lot of looking around for mink when I was out. I love to paddle, and very, very rarely came across any mink sign, particularly in the winter when they leave tracks. So that's been a long-standing thing. And then we also thought it was timely because the last survey of mammals was done by Paul Connor. He did his work in the early 60s. He mostly focused on small mammal trapping, but he was, I would have loved to spend time in the field with him. He was obviously a good field naturalist. He mentions in his publication here, which is really excellent, a lot of great information in it. Seeing tracks and sign of things. So he was an old style field naturalist. That's an endangered species these days. Everyone's into modeling. Anyway, so that's why we wanted to move ahead with this. And there were a couple other reasons. Oh yeah, so this is when did any of you last see one of these on Long Island? Gray fox, the mink, and the long-tailed weasel. So I've never seen a gray fox except for roadkill, and that was quite a while ago. And I've only seen roadkill long-tailed weasels, and that was more than 25 years ago. And I've seen mink, actually too young, in Sag Pond. And that was 30 years ago. And another reason why we wanted to pull this together, we weren't sure exactly what the DEC, the state, the Natural Heritage Program, how much time they would spend on Long Island. So we wanted to make sure we got a good going over here with surveying for mammals. But so Tim and John Turner and myself petitioned the DEC maybe 15 years ago to remove mink. Well, let me go to the next slide. Skunk, weasel, and gray fox. I think we really focused on the gray fox, though, because none of us had ever seen anything other than roadkills. To take that off of the allowable harvest for the Long Island region. And the best we could get from the DEC was this federal aid funded project to do a fur bearer inventory and monitoring of those species. And to be real up and honest about it and blunt, it was pretty shoddy and didn't result in any changes. So let's see. Oh, this is one of my fancy things here. So the last gray fox sighting on Long Island was 2003 at on Montauk Highway in Hidden Hills. And the other one is, this is a photo by Jen Higbee at Brookhaven National Lab in 2007. This is I think the last known gray fox image we have anyway. And our survey efforts, along with the state survey efforts for Long Island, yielded this blank map, just blank grids. So we have no records of gray fox. So it looks like it's extirpated. The only mink sightings we have are on Fisher's Island. And there's quite a few of them, and they're diurnal, so they're not easy to they're not hard to recognize if they're in the area. And this is what Connor has to say about mink. It has rather a wide distribution in the region. It's at home in the coastal salt marshes as well as freshwater areas inland. And we have a lot of those areas protected. And back a few years ago, I did a year-round camera trap study at otter latrine sites spread across Long Island. And they share the same habitat, riparian habitat. And colleagues of mine studying river otters, I asked them, is there a thing about mink and otter where the mink doesn't want to be around the otter scent stations or latrine sites? And they said, no. You always get mink photos when you set up a camera at an otter scent station. So anyway, just throwing this out there, should we consider a reintroduction? Unlike the river otter, the mink I think is very unlikely to come back, to make a comeback on Long Island. And could be a neat project to bring them back with a formal reintroduction. The weasel situation was a surprise. So we have 3 records on Long Island based on our work. One of these is a DEC find. And here, one of them is a roadkill up in by Mattatuck Inlet in Southold. Oh, okay. Yeah, and so the way to tell the difference, Connor says we only have long-tail weasels. But there was a question in the literature more recently about distinguishing between the 2 species, long-tail and short-tail, just from physical features. And the females of each species is much smaller than the males. So there's overlap in size between a female long-tail weasel and a male short-tail weasel. So the general rule of thumb has been if it's about the tail length to the head and body length minus the tail. If the tail length is greater than 40% of the head and body, it's a long tail. And if not, it's a short tail. Unfortunately, this wasn't measured. It was just photographed. This one is very recent. This is just 6 months ago by Carson Campbell, right? Doing his Eagle Scout project. Awesome kid. He's the son of Scott Campbell, who is a retired entomologist. And I've tried to get him to speak today about his project. But anyway, I don't know, is that 40% or it's pretty hard to tell from the photograph. And then this one, unfortunately, this was in hand by a DEC tech and it's alive. It's not happy about being in the Sherman trap for the night. And but he didn't take any tissue sample or didn't take any measurements. So it's, it looks questionable. So that remains an unknown. Needs some further work, but we are assuming these are long-tailed weasels for the time being. Striped skunk, actually, to our surprise, there's a lot of striped skunk photographs from, is it the Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn? Yeah. And there's some colleagues of mine, like Steve Biasetti, a lot of you probably know him from the Group for the East End, and some other people. They've been, keeping nature journals, and he's noticed that their distribution seems to be increasing, moving towards and onto the North Fork from the Manorville Hills area, where they've been for about 30 years. And yeah, so our the white-tailed deer probably has about the widest distribution you could get of any species, along with the raccoon and a couple other opossum. But I made a little square around those grids that are colored in Brooklyn on the waterfront. And looking those up at iNaturalist, they're skeletons and a carcass that washed up on a beach. So we can't really say that those are resident deer in that area. Okay, then we have some animals that have expanded their range since Connor's work in the 60s. And much to the dismay of a lot of farmer friends out on the South Fork, they moved across the Shinnecock Canal since Connor's work. And we have sightings of them even as far out as Montauk. And the chipmunk, Connor's quote about that animal was it wasn't on Shelter Island, despite the good habitat, but Mike Laspia knows the exact person that brought chipmunks onto Shelter Island from his cabin in the Catskills. Fell in love with chipmunks and took some home and let them go. And they're all over Shelter Island now. And that flying squirrel, we have the southern flying squirrel. That photo was taken in 1998 in Noyak, and they were also only west of the Shinnecock Canal when Connor did his field work. So we know the chipmunk came here with the help of man, and we're pretty sure that the woodchucks and the flying squirrels are, which are considered nuisance animals. We're pretty sure people move those across the canal. The flying squirrel is an animal that gets in your attic and winters there in big numbers. And, people call the pest control and nuisance control and have them moved out. So this is the current distribution, pretty widely spread across Long Island. And of the woodchuck, and then the southern flying squirrel. We don't have any records of them on the North Fork at this point, or Shelter Island and Montauk. So part of this presentation is to get some people interested in helping us fill this out for the last year, 2025. Flying squirrels, by the way, are super common, but very hard to detect because they're very nocturnal, and a great place to set up a trail cam if you're into having a bird feeder. They go to the bird feeders at night. You'd never know they were there, but if you set up a trail camera, you'll get images of them. And of course, then this is the eastern chipmunk, again, widely distributed. Okay, then there's some new species since Connor's work in the 60s. And This photo is first live outer photo from Long Island by Robert Sendling, who I've never met, but right when I started this study in 2008 on river otters, sent me a photo of one from St. John's Pond in Cold Spring Harbor. And I showed it to Norm Sewell, who a lot of you here probably know. He was managing the Cold Spring Harbor Fish Hatchery at the time, which is stone's throw from where this picture was taken. And just to bust his chops a little bit, because he's the kind of guy that you really want to give it to him if you know him well. I said, Norm, do you know that there's river otters hanging out right by your trout factory there at Cold Spring? And no, he didn't know that, but he soon figured it out. And oh, Norm, I sent Norm this photo and he actually could identify the fish, a golden shiner. And then of course the coyote, which we've talked about a little bit. Actually, Stefan mentioned that. Okay. Yeah. All right. So the coyote actually I should spend a little time on this. It's really a fascinating story, how it moved into the east with the bounties on the wolves and eliminating wolves from the from our landscape. And in moving eastward, the western coyote interbred with wolves as they moved into from the west or on the north side of the Great Lakes and into Ontario before they descended they showed up in New York around the 1930s. And they were so much bigger than the western coyote, they got nicknamed the coy dog. And my professor at St. Lawrence University, Doc Green, he was studying them in the 70s. They didn't have the sophisticated lab techniques to figure out DNA, but it ends up it has, oh, you can't see the bottom there. It has about 10% domestic dog, up to a quarter wolf, and the rest is western coyote. So there's a bunch of interesting things that you can think about it. There's one is, should this be called a different species? And there is a proposal to do that. And then has it stopped evolving? Is it, as it moves onto Long Island, which is the last big landmass in the lower 48 that it hasn't totally colonized, are the ones that disperse out east where there's not other mates to be had, will they occasionally mate with feral dogs or domestic dogs that are let loose? So, but fascinating animal to study. So the river otter, this is our results so far, and it's colonized all four of the major watersheds on Long Island. And it basically started out colonizing the whole North Shore east of Glen Cove since 2008, and then making it onto and then into the Peconic River watershed. There's a lot of unoccupied habitat on the South Fork, and a lot of they've only recently made it to the South Shore. And that's what we have so far for the eastern coyote. All the breeding pairs are in northern Nassau County. Oh, yeah. So now Connor specifically mentions this, but also a lot of naturalists have questioned this. So we have the pine barrens, that's red squirrel habitat. And it's always been a mystery, why don't we have any red squirrels? Because they're in the New Jersey pine barrens and other evergreen forests in the Northeast. And lo and behold, we got a red squirrel image in the city. Who knows how it got here? Someone who likes red squirrels, I don't know, who lives in Brooklyn. And then with the coyote, there's some other interesting questions, and as Stefan mentioned, what's its impact? My question was, what is its impact going to be on other mesopredators, like the raccoon? And raccoons right now have nothing that's limiting their population other than disease. So they have this boom and bust cycle where they get various diseases. Now, and I put this in here. This is a raccoon coat. So this was big in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And raccoon populations was super low on Long Island during this time. And now we have, I guess canine distemper is one of the big ones, but we have these periodic years where you walk around in the woods, off the trails, and there's dead raccoons all over the place. This one actually had a metal tag in each ear, and I never could find out what the purpose of that was. But the county has actually flown over parks and dropped, what do you call that? Some bait that has something to fight the canine distemper or rabies, and maybe a combo of that. Let's see. So again, we're very widely distributed on Long Island. Yeah, so another question was the other mesopredator we have here is the red fox. And what's the impact of coyotes? Now, coyotes were preying on raccoon. Raccoon's a tough animal to take down, but we got video. They tag team. One goes after the butt, the other one goes after the nose, and they back and forth until they take the raccoon down. But what they do with the red fox is they set up a territory and mark it. And the red fox doesn't really want to mess with the coyotes, so it may reduce the available habitat for red foxes that will keep their numbers from doing the boom bust cycle. And what do the red foxes get? They get the mange, right? So that'll be an interesting thing to study. This is a red fox photographed in its winter coat at Sunken Meadow State Park. And the diagnostic thing, so I get a lot of photographs from people. I got a photograph of a coyote, and it's more often than not, it's a red fox pup in its early coat. So it's not real fluffy looking. It kind of looks like it has mange, but it doesn't. So the black behind the ears, the black in front of the lower legs, and the white tip tail are some key features for the red fox to look at for ID. And this is a female in her summer coat, and there's a lot of gray in the summer coat, but you can see the white tip tail. And the pups here, you can even see their little white tip. And there's one right there. And there's a photograph I got. Now you can't see the black behind the ears. You really can't see the black in front of the lower legs, but you can see, the white tip tail. So that was sent to me as a coyote sighting. And here's their distribution. Again, pretty good distribution. The beaver. Connor mentions that there were several reintroduction attempts on Long Island. But he doesn't give any dates for that or any other specific information. We have this in 2006, a beaver made it here and set up a lodge and a small dam in Scoy Pond, East Hampton. and stayed there until someone ripped apart the lodge. And it eventually moved to Fresh Pond to the hills, lived out the last of its days, a solitary beaver. And let's see, so a year and a half ago, a beaver made shore at Hidden Hill State Park, made a beeline for Fresh Pond and built a lodge there. Same exact spot as the other beaver. It must be a groundwater seep. They like to be in areas that are going to freeze last. They can sense the groundwater seeps. So let's see if this is going to work now. Okay, the video is coming up next. So this is a photograph of the beaver more recently arrived from possibly Fisher's Island. They show up on Fisher's Island pretty regularly. There's no habitat there for them. So they move on to the archipelago that includes Great Gull and Plum Island. They've been feeding on Plum Island, and if any warm-blooded mammal that makes it onto Plum Island is not supposed to leave alive. So there's an effort to find it. And I get a call from those guys occasionally. They also found otter sign there. And there's been a roadkill on in Orient recently. So I'm assuming it came in from that way. And here's that scent mound at Fresh Pond. And there's lots of evidence of them feeding on Fresh Pond. And the guys that work at Hither Hill State Park happened to be on the beach in, I think it was late March, early April. And, let's see, might need a hand with, can I get it to show the video by using this? Yeah, there we go. There we go. So this came out of the surf. And they happened to be standing on the beach, setting up plover fencing or something. They walked right. It was like, I've had a rough day. I couldn't believe it. And, you know, at this point, it's maybe, you know, a third of a mile from Fresh Pond. It just due north into the pond. Pretty cool. Okay, the small mammals. So this was where we tried to do some trapping. How am I doing for time? 2 minutes, okay. Voles, shrews, moles, and mice. We didn't have a lot of luck, but this is a lot trickier than I had imagined. With two voles, the meadow vole, which was very easy to capture. But the pine vole, which is a little smaller and more fossorial, is very difficult to capture. We do have some images that people just happened to be where it was above ground feeding and got some good photographs. The masked shrew, as I said, is so lightweight. It was very difficult to trap, and it didn't go for our pitfall traps. But Connor mentioned that was one of the very widespread. And then the star-nosed mole, he found a lot in the Carls River watershed. They like more wet substrate than our common eastern mole. And the meadow jumping mouse, I was surprised to hear that they had to do DNA work on this. So I have this sample that I collected in Hither Hills. But it hibernates 6 months out of the year and super nocturnal, so it's very hard to survey for. And then what we assume is the white-footed mouse, but we took a lot of tissue samples of mice to verify that we have white-footed and not deer mice, two different species of Peromyscus. And among the other shrew we have is the short-tailed shrew. Now this distribution map is like, wow, Well, not a lot of that is trapping. A lot of that is just people seeing them on trails where they've been captured by red foxes, for example, and they have this anti-predator thing where they don't want to eat it. They capture it and they go, "Oh, I'm not gonna swallow this." But unfortunately for the short-tailed shrew, they're usually dead anyway, so it doesn't really help them out. Okay, and I'm going to end with a question. Bobcat were on Long Island for quite a long time. There was a bounty on bobcat that was renewed in the 1800s, and they were probably wiped out by the end of by late 1800s. But if you look at the home range sizes in the literature, they vary by the prey density. And on Long Island, we don't have a lot of predators of small mammals. So we have a very rich prey base. And an example of that is the first breeding pair of coyotes on Long Island had a litter of was either 8 or 9 pups, which is a function of the kind of food sources they have. So anyway, on the small end of the home range sizes for the bobcat listed in the literature, they're around the same size as the territory sizes for the red fox. 250 acres for females, 600 acres for males. And yeah, it might be worth at least doing a feasibility study on, what that might be like. Anyway, thank you very much, and thanks everyone for coming. Dan.
Question. Was the black bear on Long Island?
Yes.
In colonial times?
Yes. Black bear was here, as was the wolf, believe it or not. And I don't know if black bear would be a good reintroduction idea. Is that Louise Harrison? All right. You got to move very close to the microphone itself.
How about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 species. The mink.
Yeah.
When I used to go to Stanford every day for work, I used to go out to the Mill River in the middle of this huge urban area. There were mink all over the place. And Stanford's right across from Lloyd Neck. It's pretty short.
So what year are you talking?
Stopped there in 2011.
Wow. It's not too long ago.
So they would swim it's about 10 miles across Long Island Sound there. So
No, yeah.
It's a relatively close population.
I don't think, unlike the otter, I don't think mink would fare well in recolonizing this naturally. Yeah, because they're not really strong swimmers. They like to be in the water they can walk in.
They were great.
Yeah.
The other is the weasel, and many of us here in the room were part of the fight to save the Grandifolia Sandhills back in the
Right.
holidays.
Yeah.
And Paul Adams was making an impassioned plea to protect that area because of weasel.
Wow, cool.
I went back into the testimony a couple years ago from the Riverhead hearings on that to see if he had mentioned whether it was short tail or long tail, and he did not. But he had the hummingbird sanctuary there. He still owns the property. He probably be happy. I'm not volunteering him, but
right. Oh, if you could, yeah. Yeah. If you could send me his contact information, I could follow up on that. Yeah. Oh, okay. Great. Thanks, Louise.
I was just asked to give an update on Plum Island. No, that's
yeah. So regarding those species, we would like to like for the weasels, we know they're here. There's not many of them here. But we really need to work to get those off of the allowable trapping list.
Hi.
Hi.
I read about mange being a side effect of anticoagulants like rat poison. And there is a bill right now in legislation. Have you guys been studying any of those effects throughout?
Yeah, so I actually found a hours-old bald eagle below its nest when it should have been incubating eggs last March in Montauk County Park, of all places. It was sent to the DEC and they found it was one of the anticoagulant rodenticides. And that just made me aware of the extent of use of that, because I know it's an issue in New York City with their rat eradication program, but Montauk, I mean, so I find out, I'm asking around, and a lot of the restaurants will hire someone who's licensed, because you can't buy it anymore in the hardware store, but you can just call someone up and they'll do the dirty work for you. It's pervasive all across the Northeast. Big problem.
Oh, is this working?
Yeah, just get close to it.
Um.
Oh.
No, excuse, it's pretty similar. Like he put together a list for us on, species declining, almost extinct, etc. And, I was wondering for the Long Island mammals.
Yeah.
Is that you? I guess the real question is there any official repository like the New York Heritage had for plants or animals, that is being done? The county, the state, anyone?
So Seatuck actually got a grant from the Long Island Community Foundation to do the 2 years so far of the mammal survey, and we'll have a report that we'll be generating. And Matt Schlesinger actually suggested that we get together and update Connor's work, include some of his stuff and contrast it with what we found recently, and publish and make a publication out of that. So yeah, and we have a lot of information on the mammals of Long Island on the Seatuck website.
I can see mink slides along the bank. They like to slide down the mud slide. So that was pretty common. And when I was 12 years old in 1952, I actually saw a bobcat in Wildwood. So I'm not sure, how that went along with me.
Photographic evidence, or we don't want to talk about it, because I could do a half-hour talk on images that have been sent to me about, yada, yada, yada. All right.